Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are pleased to welcome to today's show a former guest and now the newly minted and sworn-in District Attorney of Lackawanna County, Brian Gallagher, a veteran state and federal prosecutor who is now in charge of the DA's office, an office he had once been the first assistant in. Prior to this current position, Brian was an assistant United States attorney in the Department of Justice. He received his Juris Doctorate degree from the Western Michigan School of Law. In his time in the DA's office, Brian has served on the Gun, Gang, and Drug Unit, where he prosecuted felony cases involving drug trafficking and gang and gun-related violence. We'll need all that experience in his current position. Brian was later put in charge of the Major Crimes Unit, where he oversaw prosecution of major crimes, including homicide, manslaughter, aggravated assault, and gun violence. Today, we will be discussing his new appointment and the problems we face in Lackawanna County, which are, as we all know, historical spikes in homicides, directly related to the proliferation of gang activity, as well as the corollary drug issue, specifically fentanyl. Also, please stay tuned after the interview with Brian, and you'll hear my view on congressional Democrats' claim that President Trump's appointment of Elon Musk is a constitutional crisis. I don't think so.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Congratulations, first of all, District Attorney Brian,
Thank you
and
very
welcome
much.
to the Volpe Report.
I appreciate you having me here. It's an exciting time.
Well, let me tell you what, it's rare I get to say congratulations as the first words. Usually I just say, hey, Brian, welcome to the Volpe Report, or District Attorney, or Mr. Speaker, whoever it happens to be. But no, I haven't actually personally seen you since you were sworn in a short time ago.
Yeah.
So when you come into this office, you come in from a position of great knowledge and experience, not just your experience as a prosecutor. You've been a United States attorney, an assistant United States attorney. You've prosecuted crime at the federal level. You've obviously been an assistant district attorney. And before you became elevated and sworn as the district attorney, you were the first assistant. So from your view of the office, from an office standpoint, you're now in charge of making, because now you're administrator on top of everything else. What do you view as your biggest challenges coming, before we get to the crime and prosecution part? That's a whole separate issue, just in terms of coming in as DA.
So anyone who's going to be the chief law enforcement officer of a county or the middle district of Pennsylvania as a federal prosecutor, that person has to have an acute understanding that the office belongs to the people. Without that understanding, you're setting yourself up for failure. I'm a caretaker. Nobody lives forever, right? My job is to preserve and advance the integrity of the office. And if I don't, the system fails. That message that the office is for others, it has to permeate throughout the DA's office. And that's a culture that really was started under the individual I was hired by, which was Judge Andy Jarbola. And it is something that I carry with me every day. It's something that our office, after our first office meeting, everyone was acutely aware of. That's what it's about. The people, it's about law enforcement, it's about keeping our family safe, and it's about protecting people's civil liberties. Right. So that's the biggest takeaway so far.
It's an onerous task, but again, I think you're uniquely qualified with all your years as a federal prosecutor, as a state prosecutor with the DA, now as the district attorney yourself. So, I don't ever remember having a gang issue in this region. As you're well aware, and remember, my audience probably has heard me talk ad nauseum, so apologies about having run for governor of Pennsylvania as a credible, serious candidate as a Democrat. Part of that campaign I was asked by my staff to ride in the back of a police car in Pittsburgh because my campaign headquarters, and I lived in Pittsburgh at the time, Brian. So at any rate, I was in the back of a car traveling with them. So I spent about 6 hours. And at any rate, they were educating me, and the issue for them were the Bloods and the Crips. And, they wore, for the Bloods, red and black were the colors. And, of course, the Crips were blue. And it is my understanding, and I'm going to ask for you to comment on, that's probably the gang, at least from what I have heard, probably has the most traction right here, along with a few others. But at least the Crips, I know, has a pretty good footprint in this area. So take it from there. We have a gang problem, and I imagine since you were really the head of the gang task force as first assistant, how do you tackle that?
A couple different ways. Number one, we have to be aggressive. We need aggressive details. We need aggressive law enforcement. We need aggressive plans on weekends and nighttime where normally we don't have people working, right? We have to invest money in those details. We have to invest money in enforcement, right? And we have to be aggressive. Being aggressive is not being harsh. It's about being responsible, protecting our neighborhoods. Downtown Scranton looks great. Neighborhoods aren't doing so well. And that's what I've heard most from my neighbors and the people that live where my parents' neighborhood or friends and family. The neighborhoods aren't great. We have to be aggressive. It's our responsibility to be aggressive. We're not doing it out of hate. We're doing it out of love for our neighbors and family.
Of course.
On top of that, and I guess coupled with it, is that's proactive, right? We also have to engage the school districts and school programming and make sure kids, especially our middle school kids, we have programs for young kids, we have programs for kids in high school. Middle school is kind of where we lose them, right? It's when you're becoming a man or a woman. It's when you're exposed to influence and you take a right or a left-hand turn. That's where we need to target resources at the school district level.
Well, yeah, of course. And I could remember from that meeting back in March, things you're well aware of is that, and this shocked me. I'm going to tell you, it absolutely shocked me when Marty Flynn told all of us, based on statistics he had gotten from the state as a senator, that we had the most reported incidents of some gang interaction in the Scranton School District than any other school district in the state. There are 123 known gang members in the Scranton School District. So you talk about, we don't have a gang problem. We have a gang problem. I know that's something as I said, that was really a major responsibility of you. And it sounds like you have some answers about how you're going to deal with it. I'm expecting, I think you will coordinate with the state police and with the feds as well. We'll participate.
Yeah, something else I learned both working as a state prosecutor and a federal prosecutor is collaboration. And I think we're going to collaborate more often. Okay. The federal government, our federal agencies have been amazing in helping us, but we want to work together more often. They want to help us. Right. I think we need a culture of collaboration where it's the Scranton Police Department, the DA's office detectives, the Pennsylvania State Police, and our federal agencies work together to root out crime, prevent it from coming into really where it's at right now, which is in Scranton, prevent it from spreading throughout Lackawanna County, our boroughs and townships. And then again, investing and having programs for kids at school so they have some alternative, something alternative to do after school rather than go out on the street.
Right. One of the issues is, to me, it's a societal issue in effect. The numbers, Brian, are staggering. It's like 2 out of 3 children of color are born with just a mother. Well, boys, males, are going to find a male role model. So the danger, as I see it, it becomes a social problem, is that where do they find that male, role model? If they don't have it in their home, well, there's only a couple places. You hope that they channel that into a coach, if they have athletic ability, a music teacher or an art teacher, if they have artistic ability, if they can sing or dance. Unfortunately, there's 2 other male role models that some wayward kids find. They find the drug dealer and they find the gang leader. sometimes the drug dealer and the gang leader all in the same person. But once they go down that road, you're on a road that ends up dead or in jail and part of the criminal justice system. So I don't think we could talk, enough really about that issue. Here's a statistic I know I think it was, I read somewhere that Scranton last year in Lackawanna County effectively had 7 murders. I know, is that, you would know better than me with the numbers.
Yeah, if you go back from November of 23
Okay.
through December
Of 24.
there were 7, yeah.
7. And that had never happened before, right?
Never happened.
Right.
The rash of violence we've been seeing in Scranton really is alarming. Like, we had a detective shot twice in the head. In the
Cal
car.
Gilmartin.
In the car with him were 2 other detectives that were shot at and luckily weren't killed. Right. We have juvenile gang members driving around, stealing cars, then shooting intermittently into people's homes. We had a student on Scranton High's campus with an AR-22 who took a public bus up from Wilkes-Barre. But again, the way we get out of that is being aggressive on the front end and then helping those kids who don't have a father figure or a good male role model at the schools. What are we doing at schools? We're putting our arms around these kids, right? We're saying, hey, instead of going out after school, we're going to keep you in this after-school program. Okay. We actually have one right now in the Scranton School District that we piloted. Which
Talk
is
a little bit about that.
Yeah, which is working fantastic. Kids who have some behavioral problems or even are on probation, instead of getting a probation violation or getting sent to detention, they're given the option to go to this jiu-jitsu program that we set up with the Pennsylvania State Police and the Scranton School District. And what they do is they have to stay after school for an hour. It's about 10 to 15 minutes of behavioral skills and social skills, and then they go and go to jiu-jitsu with members of the state police and with the great Jim Simmerl, who is
my brother-in-law.
Is he really?
Is my brother-in-law.
But Jim has been in jiu-jitsu forever.
Seventh degree black.
And the kids love him, right? So these kids go to this program. He puts his arm around them. A couple good things come from it. 1, they build a relationship with law enforcement. 2, they get a positive male role model. And 3, sometimes they need to be humbled a little bit, right? We have our young kids, when you're becoming a man or a woman, you get a little cocky and you think you could do whatever you want.
You lift the world.
Right. So sometimes getting on a mat and finding out that you're not the strongest person is a good thing for some humility. And guess what? This program is working. These kids stay. Can I come next week? You don't have to, but you're more than welcome to. Can I bring a friend? Absolutely. So they are attracted to this program. They're attracted to the state troopers that do it. They're in plain clothes. They're in wrestling gear. It's something I'm super proud of that we teamed up with Scranton, the Scranton School District and the state police and Jim. But it's working really well. It's actually, we piloted it right now. It's at Northeast Intermediate.
Right.
We're going to try to bring it to all the schools. One thing we're trying to do, and it's a huge problem, is a lot of these kids are going home hungry. Right. So what we're trying to do is have community partners that when they leave the jiu-jitsu, they're going to get a box, whether it's a banana, a power bar, and a Gatorade, or something like that, so that
that's a great idea.
Nourished. But builds relationships with law enforcement, builds relationships with a positive male role model, and they get humbled a little bit. Yeah. So maybe their behavior changes. So that's what it's all about, and that's what, when I say we have to engage our school districts, that's part of it, right? That's part of it. If
you have a problem, like a statewide problem, you're at the top of a bad list in a school district, and you're addressing it right there, and you're right. Look, Brian, that's when it happens, right? You get on that road, the left wrong turn or the right turn, and real role models. Look, Jimmy, love him. He's my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
He's probably, look, I'm a lot older than you, but your father will remember. Look, he was a tough son of a gun back when he was young, and then, of course, focused his energies and became a master in that art. And I wouldn't even want to guess how many kids, young men, he has trained. They've gone on to win tournaments. They've gone to New York and Philadelphia.
The other thing I want to mention is this. For whatever reason, right, and you talked about society, there's a societal distrust in some members of some different parts of our community with law enforcement.
Right.
When they go to this program and we say to them, you know what, in lieu of a probation violation or in lieu of a suspension, if you complete this program, we're not going to write you up. It's not going to go on your record. And when they complete the program and we honor that agreement, that builds trust. that builds a relationship, that builds honesty between pupil, between teacher, between pupil, between law enforcement. And that's something that's like, you know what? Maybe we can work together. Maybe we can bring it back. Maybe we don't have to. I don't have to have this distrust of law enforcement. I could call Trooper. I could call Mr. Simmer. I could call my teacher that was there that taught us about this, about the issue I'm having at home. And if we stop one kid from going into a gang, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, you stop sounds to me like lots of them. Another thing I think that I've heard about from you, from Marty, I've heard from my good friend, now he was a very good criminal defense lawyer, now Judge Frank Ruggiero, and that is that we just don't have the jail space for a juvenile detention center. And I know they're trying to put some money aside, but they're like trying to use buckets of water to drain the ocean. It's not getting close. Frank told me there were situations where you had some of these kids that had committed violent crimes. They slap an ankle bracelet on them, and out they go, right back out into the street.
Right.
Well, that's an issue.
Yeah, and it's something that we desperately need. And it's not just us, it's everywhere in the state. But we desperately need it, and it's twofold. It's they commit a violent crime or adjudicated and sentenced to some sort of incarceration, meaning home confinement incarceration. Well, there's not really supervision at home. So they're just out on the street. Juvenile probation would have to go and pick them up. The other problem we have is if these people commit heinous crimes or robbery or assault with a deadly weapon or fire or shooting someone, if they're not put away, if we don't have a detention bed, guess what? They're going back into school on Monday. And so what does that do to our school district where we're trying to help kids with this program, right? And there's been countless times where the superintendents have said, why is this person back in school? They just were sentenced on a robbery last week. And it's something that we need help with. The juvenile system correctly is set up for treatment, rehabilitation, and supervision, right? Is this juvenile amenable to treatment? If they are, great. If they're not, then we have to put them in the adult system. And that's my responsibility as the DA. There's certain crimes that we call direct file offenses, and we're going to aggressively pursue direct file offenses.
What's that?
If you, rape, robbery, burglary with a deadly weapon, or homicide, right? So anytime a juvenile is shooting at somebody or shoots somebody, you have to be over the age of 14 and use a deadly weapon and committing an enumerated offense, which are delineated in the statute. We have to be aggressive and start using the direct file statute so that, you know what, we have to get them off the street, right? We also have to take a good hard look at those individuals who have just failed in the juvenile system. The juvenile system in Lackawanna County gives you so many resources and so many opportunities to succeed. There are service providers, there's juvenile probation, there's all of these people that really are there to help you. And we still have some kids that are continually to commit crimes. So if you're on probation and you commit subsequent 4 or 5 subsequent offenses, it's my responsibility as the DA to file a petition with the court to transfer you to adult court. Right. And that way, maybe you'll get it.
Right.
But
because if you don't do that and go through that process, my understanding is state law is unequivocal on housing juveniles with adults. You can't do it.
Right, and there's no sentencing guidelines, right, in the juvenile system. So you have a review period every 30 days. Every 30 days, you have a review hearing before the court. So there's not a sentencing guideline. If you commit this crime in the adult system, we look at your prior record score and the offense gravity score, and you get a range. In the juvenile system, that doesn't exist. It's like, let's see how you're doing. So
well,
that's tough for people on the street to swallow when they see somebody who shot through their window or stole their car or hurt one of their kids. That person's on an ankle bracelet walking past the house.
Yeah.
And that can't happen in society, right? We're a civilized, law-abiding society. That can't happen.
Right. Well, I can think, Brian, of no person I'd rather have tackling this issue than you.
I appreciate that.
And I know, and so my audience knows in full disclosure, I think the world of your family. Your father's a personal friend, Terry, a distinguished judge, district justice for decades, really, right?
30 years.
30 years. I also, beside you have a brother, and his son is taking his place as a district justice. So you have a father and you have a brother in the the court system, if you will, in a judicial capacity. And now there's you. So and you have another brother, I think, coaches Scranton Prep's football team. So you can't forget about Terry, right? You can't forget about him. So you're a family that has done tremendous things in this community. You know, you have all picking up the mantle of your father, who's now retired. So I wish you good luck in your endeavor. And I can't think we could do any better than have you as district attorney.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
We are here again with now district attorney Brian Gallagher. He's outlined, he is now sitting as the incumbent district attorney, and he is about to seek a full 4-year term in his own right. He'll be on the ballot, I believe it's May, the primary. So you'll be seeing his name, and he's already been doing great work at the biggest issues in law enforcement we face in northeastern Pennsylvania. We'll be back next week. And I'd also like to tell you that real quickly, I have now a view that you will see. I'd like you to stay tuned because I think you'll find it interesting. I'm going to be breaking down whether or not there's been so much back and forth about whether or not Elon Musk has the constitutional authority to do what he's doing. And I think I've got a pretty good answer for you. So at any rate, I hope you'll stay tuned for The View, and we'll be back next week. I spent the last month, since the inauguration, with somewhat of a bemused amusement of the hypocrisy, lying, and general hysteria of the congressional Democratic leaders in Washington. They are literally like trained seals in what I'll call political performance art, along with their trained lemmings in the mainstream media. So as I've done in the past, I'll debunk their lying charges. First, the Democrats are treating the federal bureaucracy, which in truth is nothing more than an extension of the executive branch, as an independent fourth branch of government, and suggesting that the president, Trump, lacks the authority to appoint Elon Musk as head of the Department of Government Efficiency. And even if he does, it requires the advice and consent of the Senate. Wrong. A little civics information is in order. There are not 4 branches of government. There are only 3 in our Constitution. Article 1 creates Congress with the right of appropriation and to pass all laws necessary for policy, funding those initiatives, and power to investigate so as to be informed as to what laws are necessary to secure and fund the rights guaranteed in our Constitution. Article 2 creates the office of the President, the chief executive, with the mission statement to enforce those rights guaranteed by the Constitution and the laws passed by Congress. The breadth and scope of that power necessitated the creation of executive departments to assist the president to carry out his policy directives in accordance with the laws passed by Congress. Those departments fall under the power of the president as spelled out in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. The check and balance on the president's unilateral authority in appointing secretaries to lead those departments is the power of the Senate and Congress to advise and consent to those appointments. Of course, Article 3 creates the judiciary to interpret the laws and their application. Again, there is no fourth branch, although congressional Democrats treat those executive departments as if they are some kind of independent deep state. They are not. Now, back to our issue as to whether or not the president has the power to appoint Elon Musk to head up his Doge department without the advice and consent of the Senate. He absolutely does. In the executive order President Trump signed, he appointed Musk as a special envoy and consultant of the president to work with and under each secretary in each department, each of whom was separately appointed by the president to carry out his policies, and all department heads or secretaries were confirmed by the Senate. All Democratic lawyers know this, if they are competent. After all, they were the ones that advised Democratic President Barack Obama to do exactly the same thing when he signed an executive order in 2014 creating the United States Digital Service known as USDS. Instead of Doge, we have USDS. They were staffed with top tech talent from Silicon Valley. They worked with the Office of the President, Barack Obama, to consult with Obama's executive department heads, each of the secretaries, to modernize their tech infrastructure. So Musk, under Trump's executive order, is serving as a special government liaison to make government more efficient. This is precisely what Obama did. Now every expenditure is subject to audit, and Musk will be coordinating with the president and the executive department heads. But the best part of all this, Musk is serving under a special congressional grant of power that Congress did by statute to the president to utilize such a person. That's right. I said the power of DOGE actually originated in a congressional statute which allowed for both Obama's and Trump's executive orders. That original statute was passed at the urging of another hallowed Democratic president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, to make it easier for private sector talent to help the federal government on a temporary basis without having to undergo Senate confirmation, burdensome financial disclosures, and the requirement to make burdensome divestitures to avoid conflicts of interest. Maybe you remember JFK's best and brightest he brought to Washington in the early 60s. That's why all the federal courts that issue temporary stays stopping Musk are rescinding the same and are finding the president has, in fact, the power. They've already been rescinding them in a number of jurisdictions the Democrats have challenged. Now we are going to turn our attention to the second ridiculous claim the Democrats have thrown up, which is that Musk is an unelected billionaire oligarch conducting a shadow government. Wrong again. Once again, let's talk about congressional Democrats' hypocrisy. Apparently, they have no problem with the thousands of unelected federal bureaucrats unilaterally making decisions, no advisor consent, no congressional oversight, given broad discretion, creating onerous regulations, determining what rights we have and don't have, picking winners and losers, and now we know, costing taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars in waste and corruption to further progressive, radical Democratic causes that the voters overwhelmingly rejected on November the 5th. You want to talk about billionaire oligarchs, unelected and running a shadow government? Let's talk about George Soros, pumping hundreds of millions of dollars of dark money into Democratic coffers, funding the campaigns of progressive, soft-on-crime district attorneys that have destroyed our beautiful cities. Of course, then we hear nothing but crickets from the Democrats. No calls to man the barricades, no calls to get to the streets, no calls to shut down Washington, no declarations of war. Crickets. On the other hand, I do seem to recall President Trump campaigning all over the country with Elon Musk at his side. You all remember, telling the American people exactly what they were going to do to drain the swamp. And you know what? That's exactly what the voters wanted and gave them an overwhelming mandate to do just that. Everything Musk finds he shares with the president and the secretaries, and most importantly, with the American people. And now that we know what he has uncovered and will continue to uncover, it's exactly what the voters elected President Trump to do. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.